everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Louisa, and I'm here today with the very amazing Justin McDermott, who I have known for a few years now. And yeah, Justin and I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive today on a prickly topic, or a topic that I find prickly and sometimes contentious, which is the topic of involuntary treatment in psychiatric treatment for mental illness. Involuntary treatment is quite high here in Australia, from what I understand. Justin's the expert, is going to share some more info with us on that. But from my research, I found that it is high in Australia. And of course, it goes on all over the world. So wherever you are on the planet, this may be of interest to you, whether you're a person with lived experience, you're caring for somebody, or you're working in the system. Yeah, so welcome, Justin.
Thank you, Louisa. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So we're just going to have a chat, really. It's pretty informal. But I guess a good starting point will be to just introduce yourself and perhaps a bit about your background and why you're passionate about this topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've come through the mental health system as it's called consumers at the moment with the language. But yeah, many years navigating that with my own struggles with mental health. And now currently in a position where I'm working as a peer worker in the public health system for about 4 years now. And I
Mhm.
love the work,
Mhm.
has its challenges. The best is working with consumers, and the, the challenges with as I face through my years with having a good relationship with the clinical team. But yeah, where I'm at now, I feel very strong in my mental health recovery journey, and
Mm.
I'm sort of giving a bit back in my work with walking alongside people who are undergoing challenges currently, and having a peer worker inspire me to become a peer worker was a big thing.
Mm.
Yeah, I've done many things in my life. I've been had a fencing business, and a German beer cafe. I was been hospitality management, but this is the best job I think so far,
Oh,
and all of that. I really love it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's so good to hear. I can relate to it because one thing we have in common is, um, yeah, having our lived experience and then moving into peer work and then also working in hospitals, which I did a fair bit, but you and I were in different areas. I worked in private and they don't have involuntary treatment in private system. Whereas you work in public, and in public system in Australia, that's where the involuntary treatment is. So it's interesting to compare our experiences as we talk today. Um, but yeah, I do understand those environments that you're in and really honor the work that you're doing because it's tough out there sometimes to be a person with lived experience in a very clinical environment.
I just wanted to touch on
Mm,
something you said earlier. Yes,
yeah.
yeah, coming from Victoria statistically has the worst rates of CTOs in Australia, and
Uh,
Australia is, last I heard, was it has the highest rates in the world of using
wow.
compulsory treatment orders.
In the world.
We've had a royal commission down here, and a big focus is moving away from the use of CTOs,
Mm.
extra people of their autonomy, and moving towards other ways and new ways, and as they're coming out. Yeah, it's slow and steady, and there's heated arguments on both sides of the fence.
Mm, and you're really in the thick of it, aren't you? Working in the public system with the people that you work with.
Yeah, yeah, quite challenging situations people are in, and can be very difficult with the treatments, and how it's been historically is to is to treat first, and talk later. That was my journey, at least.
Hmm.
That that it can be very hard to have good therapeutical relationships. I think 70% of efficacy is a good therapeutical relationship with your doctor or treating team.
Hmm.
If it's not there, it becomes a very hard upward hill battle. Obviously, if you're having to put a CTO, it's not there, not at its best, and
Yeah.
is 70% gone. I think, yeah.
Can you just unpack for anyone who isn't from Australia this term CTO? Because even in Queensland, we have a different term for it.
Yeah, sure. CTO stands for Compulsory Treatment Order.
Mm.
It's placed on a person and with four criteria.
Hmm.
First, that the treating team establishes a mental illness. Second, that they need immediate treatment. Third, that treatment can actually be provided, and no less restrictive treatments are available. So in a CTO, it's basically a consumer primarily. They can have supports in there more often than not because of the weight of the system. I'll unpack that later maybe.
Hmm.
The treating team who have put forward a document to the tribunal requesting the application of a CTO. They've normally had weeks, months, years to compile the evidence, whereas the
Mm.
consumer gets about 3 days prior is the when it has to be given to them to notify what the treating team is saying in the CTO.
Wow.
So yeah, the massive power imbalance there.
Hmm.
And then there'll be three people usually on the tribunal. There'll be a community member, a legal member, and a clinical member. So normally a doctor of psychiatry, and a community member representing the interests of community, and the legal member holding the law
Hmm.
focus of the tribunal.
Hmm.
I've seen improvements actually over the years where there is movement in more often than not. It can be hit and miss, but most of the time they're giving the consumer more and more chance to speak for themselves and things. But obviously there is that power imbalance of weeks to months to build the request
Mm.
versus 3 days to really prepare.
Mm.
Obviously, this could never happen in a court of law. Usually,
Mm.
both legal sides get ample time to prepare.
Hmm.
This is a legal decision, and that's how it's currently weighted.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Just that comparison there with the legal system, with the courts as we know them. If someone is accused of a crime, um, when I used to do my research back in my social work days when I was studying my master's in social work, I remember looking into this that it's quite astounding that in the legal courts you can't be persecuted for a crime in the future, a crime that people think you're going to make, right? But that's actually happening with the CTOs because, forgive me if I'm wrong, but they're basing the idea of having to put someone on involuntary treatment on the assumption that they're going to hurt themselves or others. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is that,
Mm.
and it is very grey because, as you say, it's a risk assessment on that.
Mm.
So that harm to others and harm to self can also include doing harm to one's reputation,
Mm.
where there can be a lot of grey lines in that, as
Mm.
if they're responding to voices or things like that they're having as an experience, that can be seen as that and
Wow.
meet that criteria of harm to oneself.
Okay. So in a a silly example. So, someone is behaving inappropriately according to our social mores.
Mm.
I don't know, maybe I I did some pretty strange things myself. So, you know, I used to run through parks, sometimes screaming my head off. Harm to reputation, that would be
Mm.
disturbing the peace, perhaps.
Can be seen as that, and can be
Yeah.
seen as
Mm, mm.
she's having the time of her life.
Well, exactly. And I think this is one of the points you want to kind of allude to, is this idea of who's deciding what is harmful and what's not, who's deciding the story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And we will definitely go deeper into that. But before we leave, I guess the nuts and bolts of the treatment orders, how long do you have any stats there about how long people actually are on these things?
Yeah, so that's actually reduced too. That's been a positive thing,
Hmm.
where the maximum is 6 months. Someone can be put on a treatment order. It used to be up to 2 years.
Okay.
But that said, they're generally applied and reapplied based on it passed as well.
Mhm.
And that pass can run for a long time. As depends on how it's weighted by the treating team, whether it's where the person's at or not in some situations, because they feel the risk rather than the risk whether the risk is there or not, and it is
Hmm.
just the risk.
Hmm.
Like you're saying, people can't in normal circumstances be tried on what they may or not do in the future, but
Mm. And
yeah, it's there in this situation. But yeah, sorry, the 6 months they can is the general time treating teams will go for.
now I just want to highlight there in my practical experience, anecdotally, as a person working in this field, that that 6 months might be technical, but in reality, it seems I know many people that have been on them for years. So um, just to clarify that for the audience, right? It's not as if the 6 months comes to end and then automatically the person gets off the CTO. Is that correct? They have to still go through a review process and
Yeah, if the four criteria is still applying
Mhm.
in the view of the treating team,
Right.
they will go for a following 6 months, and more often than not,
Mm.
people, as those walls have been put up and
Hmm.
barriers between negotiation with the consumer and the treating team have broken down. If those four criteria are still valid, the treating from the perspective of the treating team, they will reapply and go through the process again.
Hmm.
A lot of the time, people just stop turning up, even to their CTOs, because they feel they feel that power imbalance. They feel not heard, and they
Hmm.
feel what when they have been heard, it hasn't been listened to.
Yes, yes. So in practice, the CTO can kind of go on indefinitely. It's just at the beck and whim of the treating team.
Mm.
Um, let's backtrack to your story. Like how are you involved in people who earn CTOs in your work or personally, whichever you prefer to
Yeah.
address?
Um, the I got my records with the Freedom of Information, where you can get your notes.
Hospital records.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so I looked at that years later, and I saw the inclusion of a CTO that I didn't even know I was on.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was in hospital, and I was put down as not attending. That
Okay.
was a very troubled time in my life, and I'm not 100% against CTOs
Hmm.
as well. It's a weighted conversation. Like how it is at the moment with with treat first, talk later approaches, the lack of information and understanding of my situation where I was at in with relation to the treating team equates to needing some force. Does that make sense? With
Yes. So
I
are
didn't
you?
know
Mm,
have all the information of my health condition. I wasn't given a formal diagnosis. I
mhm,
was told I had to take the medication. I had little understanding. I didn't have any family that have had this before.
mhm,
I was taken to hospital after living on the streets for a while,
mhm,
and I was having experiences of voices and visions. And my narrative would have been a lot different to what 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 was going on for me than the treating teams.
mhm,
But that said, the more information I got on everything and understanding I got, there became no need for a CTO. So I didn't see why it wasn't put there in the first place to not need a CTO. I think in hospital you get half an hour with a psychiatrist
mhm.
to determine in the first week to determine whether you'll be there for the next 3 weeks. I'm speaking of my experience. It
Yeah, yeah,
can
sure.
be different.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I was in there for a bit, and according to my notes, I was put on a CTO.
Hmm.
And upon leaving the hospital for community treatments and ITO, if you're in hospital as an
Yes.
inpatient treatment order.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's my battle, I suppose. If I can see the justification for people who have harmed others or have harmed themselves and are expressing a pattern to continue to do so.
Hmm.
That this last form of um, last resort sort of activity takes place, but I didn't see myself there then, and I don't see myself there now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Going
Hmm.
back, I see it in my work where the communication's not there, the trust or in the person's capacity to understand or work towards understanding it all
Hmm.
is not really given
Yeah,
much. I believe it's getting greatly better. People
that's great. Hmm.
are offered more legal support or offered advocacy through agencies like IMAR who offer advocacy
Who's
services.
IMAR, just in case people want to know?
So they're independent, an independent body that advocate for people with mental health challenges who are going to facing a CTO or
Hmm.
give are able to explain their rights with second opinions or contesting treatment orders.
Is it Independent Mental Health Advocacy, IMAR?
Yes,
Yeah,
totally.
cool. Just so just so people can find it if they want to know more about it. Cool.
Yes,
Hmm. Hmm.
but they can be it can be hard as it's a very personal experience what you're given by the treating team
Mm.
to then go and talk to someone over the phone who you haven't met or they do um, come out and visit people, I think.
Hmm.
But but yeah, that's where I've been able to step in as a peer worker and someone who's been through all this and really advocate and walk alongside and support them advocating for themselves more often than not,
Yeah, right.
explaining the process,
Hmm.
breaking it down so it's not so overwhelming walking into the tribunal, being a bit more prepared,
Mm.
and and um, being able to get their CTOs revoked, and even the treating team being surprised by how well they've been able to advocate for themselves once the
Hmm.
information's been given. I
Okay,
think
so
17% is currently revoked out of all the CTOs that are applied for by the treating team.
17%. And is that within a certain time period or is that overall? Like, how does that
That's
work?
overall, yeah.
Yeah. And that's so someone could be on it for years and years and then have it revoked. You're counting that in that same basket, that same statistic,
Yeah.
17%.
Out of,
It could be as soon as a few weeks or it could be years.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So
There's,
that's still quite low, though, in my innocent view, my naive view, perhaps. Like it sounds like that's still an awful lot of people who aren't having their CTOs revoked.
yeah. Well, a treating team might argue that that's how accurate they are with fulfilling the criteria of what's required.
Mm,
They're getting the high percentage of people that being placed on them, and then a consumer's experience and the coerciveness discussions and things of the power imbalance and the lack of being heard, or who gets to tell the story,
yes.
really comes into play because yeah, there is all that going on, and we've heard
Mm.
through the stories of lived experience and the troubles of the system, on why things like the Royal Commission are really pushing to change the system and make it better.
Yes, and I'm sure, like all royal commissions, the actual effects of that are going to take years and years to trickle down into practical changes on the ground.
Mm,
But yeah, it's heartening. And then you said you are seeing some changes, which is really good news.
mm,
Um, I want to zoom in on this point you've been talking about the lack of being heard, the power imbalance in not having enough information. And I guess that, information is power, right? As we all know that.
mm,
Um, and perhaps just to quickly mention my own experience with this, working with someone who was on a CTO years ago in the public system. One thing I really noticed about her journey, I journeyed with her for about 18 months, and I know you've probably got many of these kinds of stories, but let's see if this is similar to some of your stories. I journeyed with her for about 18 months, and our goal was to get her CTO revoked. And we worked our butts off, like really, really worked at, trying to tick all the boxes and help her take control of her own recovery and et cetera, et cetera. But she lacked, I noticed that one of the barriers for her to get it revoked was that she lacked the education, let's say, that I had, the privilege of education,
mm.
and she lacked the ability to speak for herself in a way that sounded educated. So I nearly came close to getting on a CTO myself, Justin, and I just talked my way out of it because I have the privilege of education. I can say some big words like neuroleptic medication in front of psychiatrists. And I realized when I compared my experience to this lady's experience was that that seemed to be one of the biggest differences, um, which seems incredibly unfair, that we are essentially, and this is my take on it, but we're essentially discriminating against people who maybe just can't speak the same language as those clinicians or have that same power of education or privilege of education. Um, Add to that someone going through extreme emotional distress, which is what happens when you are placed on a CTO. You're obviously ill in some way, you're distressed, you're vulnerable because of that. Yeah, so that whole experience really highlighted to me some of the barriers to having someone's voice heard in those spaces and lack of information. Does that sound like a familiar story to you?
Yeah, very true. Um, along with the power imbalance, there's that whole range of issues and in, injustices, I suppose, with not having an education, good education background, or or being so entrenched in your own world that it's hard to relate to the outside world. There's a whole range of reasons that can put you in a place that makes it very difficult to advocate for yourself.
Mm.
Yeah, so that makes it makes it very challenging of working with people that that are insisting on having all their physical issues addressed, but they're embedded in a mental health system that is primarily for that, and the challenges of them not being able to articulate themselves properly, or
Mm.
may have had an acquired brain injury,
Mm.
or through it all, or
Mhm.
yeah, and just sometimes just they can have great education and just the walls have gone up so much of not being heard.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, that that they don't want to even interact with it all. It
Mhm.
becomes a position of them having their autonomy by not engaging at all with the treating team that's able to force its its prescriptions and beliefs
Mm.
on a person. Yeah,
You said you've had some success though in helping people advocate for themselves, perhaps address some of those barriers that might be there.
yeah,
Yeah. Can you share maybe a story or some examples of what you mean?
yeah. I'm very privileged in that space. I feel to walk alongside these people, but also that I've had these barriers myself.
Mm. Mm.
I've had these challenges myself, and it's easy to to connect and be a bridge
Mm. Yeah.
to to what they need to know, or just to give encouragement to for them to speak for themselves and the benefits that can do. Also, I was lucky enough to speak through one of them up in Sunshine Coast Hospital,
Yeah.
where I was told that clozapine would be a great thing to take and would relieve me of all my problems. And while I was trialing it, but a doctor said, "Well, you need to be on a CTO for this because of all the things they have to do, the blood checks, the health checks, the heart checks, that constantly need to be in play to be safe for this have this medication."
Hmm.
And I was gobsmacked. I thought, I'm voluntarily doing all this. Unfortunately, I was able to articulate that in
Mm.
the tribunal that this was not required. Uh, and yeah, but just having that autonomy taken away from me,
Mm.
on, because luckily that medication sedated me. I was walking around like a zombie. I got some relief from it at a lower dose that they said was below therapeutical level,
Hmm.
and I thought, okay, I'm getting some relief here. This is good.
Hmm.
They said, no, it's not therapeutic. It's probably not. You're probably not experiencing any relief. But which was a stark contrast to me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but once it was bumped up to the higher dose, I was not able to function very well at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And thereby I made the decision that I wasn't going to try it anymore. And it was my decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of people in the public health system that are very highly medicated
Yeah.
and that functioning is not there for them.
Mm-hmm.
And normally, not well, it's the medication that's it's suppressing the symptoms, but it's also decreasing functionality,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes very challenging again to articulate yourself
Mm-hmm.
in a
Yeah.
tribunal setting.
Absolutely. Look, I'm sitting here like very calmly nodding, listening, but there is a part of me that boils with rage over this issue. Having, as I said, nearly been on one myself and then witnessed other people on them. The I try and tune into that rage part, and what I get is memories of power over me being abused in my life, like experiences of abuse, essentially, where someone has so much power, and often this happens in childhood, right? And you're completely powerless. Like there's nothing you can do to stop that abuse over you, something that feels unjust or abusive. And what really concerns me, Justin, is the history of trauma and abuse in the backgrounds of so many of these people. We know that at least two-thirds, that research has shown from the Blue Knot organization, at least two-thirds of people that go to mental health hospital have histories of sexual abuse and physical abuse. That's not even counting emotional trauma and psychological abuse. So the yeah, the chances that someone who is on a CTO also has a history of childhood trauma is very, very high.
Yeah,
Um, and then I see this kind of reenactment of that abusive power dynamic going on.
yeah. It's a very it can set off so many emotions on that. I remember reading my notes and there was trauma I had to address from those years
Hmm.
through the system, and it is widespread. I'm sitting on both sides in my work. I'm
Mm.
seeing people from the clinical side come from genuinely good places,
Mm.
but and a lot of good people working in the health system for the best for the consumer,
Mm.
but I suppose understanding some of the pressures they're under
Mm.
from community and law enforcement and social standards and
Mm.
all that. Not to mention when things go wrong, we see in the news, it's the stereotypes and stigmas,
Yeah. Yeah.
sensationalized things said that put stigma across the whole system. I
Hmm.
suppose, especially these doctors can get sued. They can face severe penalties, and
Mm.
but quintessentially, I suppose what the consumers wanting is not to be so risk focused on where you believe things are, but listen to us
Hmm. Hmm.
and where we're at. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Um,
such a big dynamic dynamic of things going on,
mhm.
but it is like I say, moving towards the consumer as the expert. There is training in person-centered treatment.
Hmm.
I'm trying to push for it to
That's
be
fun.
mandatory in the system.
That's fantastic. Yes.
But But all this is going on for most consumers
Mm.
on top of the trauma they're coming on for support,
Yes.
and a place of healing and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming on as, like you say,
Mm.
um,
It's compounded trauma on top
yeah,
of
yeah,
what they've already been through, whether that was childhood trauma or more recent, because
yeah,
so many events that lead to someone seeking help or being brought in involuntarily for help. Um, yeah, that you've got someone who's in an extremely vulnerable position there. And as you alluded to earlier, something about the support network of that person might be completely lacking as well. And that
mm,
could also be another protective factor against abuse under the involuntary treatment order, which is the protective factor of having, loved ones around you that can advocate for you or speak for you or help you get through it at very least.
yeah.
How do you see that role of family and loved ones?
Um, yeah. From my experience, having the difference between when I felt isolated and when I felt supported,
Hmm.
massive. And
Mm,
I've walked alongside people who have had their family, their mother and father, come in and sit with them through the tribunal.
mm,
They were able to get a good outcome. I don't think it's an absolute difference, but
mm,
it's a massive, massive step if they've got that in their lives and that support, and they feel that connection, that the strength of their advocacy for themselves grows tenfold. Yeah, not that a person without that can't,
mhm.
but it's just another thing that can support massively when people have that or reconnect with that.
Mm.
Often mental health issues disconnect us with the external places, things going on in our lives. That there
Yeah.
is that disconnect, and if it can be reconnected and supported to reconnect,
Hmm.
yeah, it could become one of these knock out one of these good criterias of if there's other least restrictive options, was, was seen as something that's going in the person's favour, and a nurturing aspect can be there, or a
Hmm.
strong connection with, with someone else in their lives.
And is that where you come in, or peer workers in general can come in, as perhaps filling that gap or supporting, like if somebody doesn't have loved ones in their lives that can support them. And I know that sometimes in the worst case scenarios, the families are actually wanting the CTO and the person doesn't want it. So you could have
Mm.
that dynamic going as well. So just in the case of those people without any family or just needing extra support, is that where peer work comes in?
I think peer work in this situation, and a lot is it's brought up another thing. A lot of peer workers, there's this thing called gatekeeping.
Hmm.
The clinical side can determine whether a consumer's right to getting peer work. But peer work can actually, yeah, support in those ways of connection, mutuality. It's all supportive work that can bridge the gaps for people that don't have it in their lives, who feel isolated by their mental distress and how their lives have gone, or the traumas in their lives. Peer work can definitely be a bridge,
Mm.
and someone to walk alongside.
Mm.
But yeah, people that do have those in their life, then there'll be other things that peer support can do, informing of the system, and
Mm.
advocating for what they want and feels not being heard with the clinical teams as well.
Yeah.
With that,
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like a really hard job, to be honest, like to be right in the thick of it, um, in between some often very polarizing worldviews. On the one hand, you've got the clinical team with their worldview, which is not the reality. It's not the total reality, right? But their worldview about what is mental illness and what is risk and all those things, as
mm,
well as their concerns, as you highlighted before, like the pressures that are on them. And
mm,
then you've got the person themselves with the lived experience who is vulnerable, going through whatever they're going through. That's often a very chaotic, distressing time. And then there's you, kind of right in the middle. I mean, how do you cope with that, and what keeps you going? What helps you not burn out, perhaps is a better way of putting that.
yeah. So there's a whole range of things that are working for me. Um, that definitely well encapsulating all the challenges there. But we've got a strong workforce of lived experience where I work. Sorry,
Mhm.
excuse me. And and connecting with them really helps. Um, Rewards in walking alongside people, they can seem few and far between sometimes when it's constantly challenge after challenge. But when walking alongside someone, going for walks with someone that springs to mind that
Mhm.
hadn't smiled in a long time,
Mm.
and a smile came over their face through our chats
Mhm.
and things. And they were able to unpack some of their traumas and things like that. Knowing what that's been for me and seeing that come across for someone else and with a smile and I think I walked for many months around the lake with this person with not much discussion was even had from their side. I think I talked their ears off. I don't know why they kept walking, but but
Mhm.
yeah, when those changes came, it was amazing, and these are the rewards, and you just know yourself like how much it means from your own journey that these are big things that change change the course from when things are going, it seem like they're just going down and down to on the up. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there's
And being
that
able
ind
to do that is an absolute privilege. Yeah.
yeah. And you're talking there about the individual level, working one-on-one in the trenches, so to speak, of all of this. Um, which, yeah, I do understand the rewards of that myself. But then also zooming out, it sounds like you're doing work um, on more of a meta systemic level. Like you said, you were rolling out some training or you're working on some training, and you're obviously trying to change things in the system. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on training, and I've had people ask how does a peer worker get into these spaces because consumers generally in these spaces have their walls up, they have their but it's a very personal thing, and I fully respect that feel privilege that consumers have, but it can be not often, and there can be that gatekeeping I talked about from the clinical side. So yeah, growing the awareness and sharing what I've learnt from being involved in those spaces can broaden it. I know many peer workers have, and the more we share about it with other peer workers, the more comfortable and organic it can be to be in those spaces and working towards the consumer advocating for themselves to get off them. Also on the educating the clinical side, I'm working on some training and some pathways that the clinical side can see that I'm not there to go against what they're saying and
Mm.
to advocate the consumer to say what they're saying and
Yeah, right. Hmm.
that sort of thing. But and clarifying that I'm not going to conflict with their decisions and their things coming to with, but how it can improve the relationship between the consumer and the clinician, where
Hmm.
CTO is not even required. That they're working
Mm.
towards that goal. I know full well the importance of
Hmm.
medication sometimes, and
Hmm.
I don't believe it's a lifelong journey. For me, I know it can people that find the benefits that can be for them.
Hmm.
But, it's never one size fits all.
Yeah.
But yeah, walking towards the benefits of what it's what it can be for a consumer and the
Mm.
changes it can make. The more we can educate from real outcomes,
Mm.
that the more chances we'll get to help improve people's journeys with CTOs and getting off CTOs. Hopefully, move towards some reducing where Australia's not
Yeah.
worst
Yes, we want to
in
improve
the
that
world.
stat, don't we?
Yeah, I mean,
I
there's a lot of other factors that can change too, but
mm,
yeah, that's one.
I really love what you said because you took just through your explanation there, you took me out of my polarized, divisive us and them. It's a fight down here. Um, because I know where I personally sit on this, and I don't agree with them at all. But I'm like you. I worked in hospitals for a long time, and I realized pretty quickly. It sounds like you also have this deep understanding that if we act in an adversarial way, we often make things worse. So one way of approaching this is to become a bridge and to create better communication between both parties. And in doing so, we kind of rise above the issues of polarity because at the end of the day, I think we want the same things, right? We want healthy outcomes. We want people to be out there in the community, functioning, happy. It's just going about it in a radically different way. So I guess I'm trying to articulate or sum up your idea of helping the consumer have more voice is like building that second part of the bridge so that the clinicians and the consumer can meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, it's like the consumers are here on the bridge and the person has to go all the way over to the clinician side. And very often adopt the worldview of the clinicians, say, oh, yes, yes, I believe I'm terribly ill and I must take all this medication. And I was clearly delusional when I was hearing voices and visions. But they may not believe that at all.
Mm.
Often don't, right? They just learn to play the game and learn to pretend just to get off. But if
Mm.
there was better communication and the clinicians were actually hearing what the person is saying and were more open-minded, less judgmental, right? And then on the patient side, more power, more claiming of that power, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I think we would have different outcomes. Have I explained that well? Did that make sense?
Yeah, I particularly like how you said it, the consumer has to come to the worldview of the clinician who's obviously chosen the psychiatry model and
Yeah.
affirming that.
Hmm.
But as we know, like Marius Rom and the research he did with, I don't know if I'm going out of
Making
context.
sense of voices. No, absolutely, it's
Yeah,
relevant. Yeah.
but
Making
he
sense of
found
voices
he
is a book.
put it out there to people who heard voices, and a
Hmm.
lot came back, and a lot were people that had no experience with the system.
Hmm.
Now, your general psychiatrist will see hearing voices as a symptom that needs to go.
Yeah.
Through that Marius Rom research, he found that there were people who are in like well-supported situations were the people who didn't need to come um, interact with public health systems and psychiatry and whatnot. Um, so so that that's not a perspective from someone who practices medications the way to treat these symptoms. If you're not compliant with that, then you're at risk of all this. There's so much outside the scope of that worldview, and one of the criteria was if there's not other less restrictive treatments, and we know that those least restrictive treatments are growing and getting better and better. Whole range that are challenging this traditional model. So yeah, but once again, that's education, isn't it? And being knowledgeable on all these other options to challenge the
Yes,
one that
exactly.
sits in the public health system as the primary go-to. Unfortunately, my experience was. I'll tell a little bit about that.
Hmm.
I was sitting in a shopping centre with after being homeless with my mouse, pet
Oh, your
mouse.
mouse.
Yeah, I had a little pet mouse, I was it was really helped with my isolation and things. But um, I played hockey in school, and I went past. I was going back to my brother's, and I saw a hockey stick in a shop, and it was $2. So I thought I'll play hockey again. Anyway, I had my backpack, the mouse, and the hockey stick,
Uh-huh.
and I had to get to a payphone, so I went and made a phone call to my brother. Um, I went to the food court, which was a big mistake. Um, I was having the symptoms of hearing voices and stuff. I've grown not to care about that in my life and not need medication so much anymore.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there, and it must have triggered the police or the cat team, and the cat team came and took me to hospital. Very little discussion. Um, by the night time, I was fully medicated with
Wow.
no treatment, and for the next few days, I was very sedated, and very little conversation about how I got there, what where I was at,
Mm.
and like I say, the CTO was a bit, from my recollection, couldn't remember, or the ITO if I was in hospital, but we the system goes so much on history and risk, and doesn't delve into individual and hearing our story.
Mm.
I would have told that if I'd been listened to why I had
Hmm.
sick, or but I was dishevelled,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it just looked bad.
Mm. Hmm.
Um,
So you were
but
discriminated against essentially for something that society deemed inappropriate.
I think so. You know, I did continue with the public health system, mainly because it was forced and I didn't know any better. Or I didn't know all these other
Mm.
options for healing and recovery. And yeah, for the lack of knowledge, and the relief it seemed to give me to be cared for after living
Mm.
on the streets, being a place that people were caring for me and feeding.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Good
went along with
point.
the program.
Good point. Yes, yes.
Um, but if I had have known alternatives, I surely would have done that.
Mm.
Done it. Uh,
That's a wonderful story you shared, and I can't help asking what happened to the mouse. Did you? But
yeah, they they don't live long. had her for about 2 or 3 years. They let me keep her in hospital um,
That's nice. Okay,
for a
good.
time. For a time, reading back on my notes, they gave me a box I could keep her in, and
Yeah.
I made tunnels out of the toilet paper rolls
Oh.
and things, and I think I was a bit ostracized by others in there that I had a mouse walking around with a mouse on my shoulder, but it came to a point where they said the mouse had to go and send it home with your father. And in my notes it says Justin raised the middle finger, which is not like me at all. But but I had a laugh reading back at
Yeah.
that. That they've asked me, my little companion, to
Oh.
part ways
Oh.
on it.
Yeah.
But but yeah, this
That's
is something funny.
it's a great story. And I guess that's the point. The story is about story because as you come back to, if you'd just been asked what you were doing with a hockey stick and you explained yourself and you were listened to, then perhaps that whole trajectory would never have happened. Um, which highlights again the importance of story and the importance of listening.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
which yeah, it feels like, well, I'll ask you. I mean, we've had a nice roundabout chat of all the different facets of community treatment orders as much as we can do in about an hour.
Mm.
So what what would you like to see happen from here? What's your vision for how this could all turn out to be wonderful for all of us?
Oh.
What would
My
you really
God.
like to see? I'm talking about your heart. Like what's your
Mm.
heart's wish for this
Um,
situation of CTOs?
increasing the importance for people to have their reclaiming their narrative, being in control of their lives and stories,
Mm,
working towards um, the importance and giving hope to them being people being able to advocate for themselves, the importance of education prior to action. I think would be massive in reducing these numbers and these horrible statistics we've got on this. But yeah, in regards to a person's life, it just keeps coming back to who gets to tell the story.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Who gets to tell the story? That's powerful phrase. Um, because when I was looking back on my essay, I was thinking about this idea, the essay that I did for my social work master's, this idea of what is reality, and um, perhaps that's why my blood boils with this issue, because I know I personally hold a story about reality that is vastly different to most of the psychiatrists I met in the mental health system. And I pick on them because they're the ones with the power. But of course, there's, other players here, nursing staff and psychologists and social workers and all of the people that make up that system. Um, and I found in the end a psychiatrist who I created a therapeutic alliance with, right? Because he listened to my story. He listened to it, but there was a bit more to this. He didn't just listen, he accepted it, right? So he was the first psychiatrist I found that didn't judge my story about what I was experiencing. Because, like you, I had voices and visions and all sorts of things, and I was putting them into an explanation of spiritual ascension, essentially, right? And he sometimes said to me, I don't fully understand what you're saying, but I believe you. I believe it's true for you. Wow. Like to go through so many different psychiatrists and experiences in and out of hospital and all sorts of things that happened until I found this particular person. That was when my recovery really took off because he was meeting me in the middle and he was willing to accept that he didn't know everything. He was humble. He treated me as the expert of my own experience. He
Yeah.
was an expert in certain things, and I needed those certain things. Like you, I needed medication for a while. I needed hospital admissions. I needed therapy. I needed help. But he didn't impose his own judgments and fears, really, because I think the risk adverse mentality is coming from a very, very fear-based perspective. He didn't impose that on me, and so we ended up with a wonderful therapeutic alliance that, saw us through all sorts of risky things, I have to say as well. I mean, I was the type of person that would turn up in emergency departments having harmed myself and all sorts of risky behavior, hence nearly getting on CTOs. But I had someone who would listen to my story and someone who would understand my story enough that we could work through those bumps and hiccups without avoiding further harm. So
Yeah.
yeah, I believe it's
Beautiful.
possible with the
Yeah.
right attitude on both sides.
Yes. Yeah. And that's letting you tell your story.
Mm.
And yeah, I talk of this. Well, I'm getting something published in America and Psychiatry
Oh,
America. And it
fantastic.
tells a story of Aesop's fable, The Wind and the Sun,
Hmm.
where the travelers walking along and the wind and sun have a competition about who can blow the traveler's cloak off. Now the wind blows and blows with force, and the cloak, strangely enough, gets pulled tighter and tighter by the traveler. Um, but the sun comes along and shines warmly and beautifully, makes it a nice summer's day that the traveler is happy to take their cloak off. In my writing, I used it as an analogy for my psychosis, where the treating team or anyone in my life came like the wind, forcing me to be someone I wasn't. That cloak would become tighter, and the sun, which I represent as this person, you, the psychiatrist, you had listened to your story,
Yes.
was very much that sunshine where it was able to be a few layers off
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've found it a very powerful analogy, and true to my story, I met a psychologist that listened and said, "Well, why couldn't that be true?" He couldn't. Whereas most people would have the fear of the risk and shut it down on some of my beliefs, but it makes a massive difference in our journeys. I think and we have, yeah,
Wow. Oh, wow. Thank you. That's such a powerful analogy. That's a wonderful summation, really, of everything we've been talking about in metaphor, in story. So
yeah,
I hope that when you get published, you can share it with people. I don't know if it'll be publicly available, but you could always send me the link and I can put it down below this video for
yeah,
people to read if it's whenever it's ready.
yeah. It'll be
Yeah.
later this year. I think it's on a list of things to be published of lived experience stories. So,
All good. This video
but
will be in
yeah,
perpetuity anyway, so
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Um, all right. Well, look, that story feels to me like a lovely kind of completion, but I just want to invite you, if there's anything else that you wanted to share about this topic, before we leave it today, at least.
yeah. I just feel there's very fueled arguments on both sides, and you can get upset. I don't want to upset anyone with all these facts and figures
Hmm.
and compounded trauma and things. There's very strong sides on both sides of the argument, and it is working towards better. It's sort of one size is supposed to fit all, but as we know, it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the system, I think, is getting better. Excuse me, better at listening.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's there's it can be very upsetting, but
Mm.
listeners take care of themselves.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful point to make, is the self-care for each of us, because yeah, I mean, as I said to you, this topic really upsets me. So I'm imagining
Mm,
that people listening, could have brought back memories of things they've gone through, or they might be going through it right now. Um, and yeah, my heart goes out to everyone who suffers from this. I think it's one of the tragedies in our mental health system that we have to deal with. But I also have faith that collectively we can change things. And, in my long time of, well, it's not that long, it's a blip in time, really, but in my 20 years, let's say, of been working in mental health, I, like you, have seen a lot of positive changes.
mm,
And I'm an internal optimist. I don't have paranoia, I have pronoia, which is that I always see the benevolence in everything. Um,
mm,
and I understand that sometimes when people are entangled in these things, there's deep lessons for them, on either side, right? Clinicians or patients, lessons about, let's say, let's focus on the patient, lessons about sovereignty and claiming your power and claiming your voice, lessons about taking responsibility for your journey, um, despite despite external appearances, right? It might look like you're in a state of complete disempowerment, but you always have to ask yourself, what power do I have here? What
mm.
can I change? There's that wisdom in just controlling what you can control,
Yeah.
even if that's just your attitude or your nervous system
Mm,
or your perspective on things. Maybe that's all you can control. That's what you do then, right?
yeah.
And then the lessons on the other side, which is about humility and letting go of the ego-driven beliefs that hold the medical model in place, and becoming more like genuinely more holistic, and understanding that actually, things like astrology and crystals and Reiki and energy all exist as well in this marvelous world, and it's all okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've got faith, I guess I'm trying to say, is that I think together we can change this, but we have to do it together.
Beautifully said. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fully agree.
yeah. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Justin. It's been really enlightening and interesting to go into this topic. And yeah, if people want a part two, just put a comment down below. I'm sure that I can convince Justin to come back for another chat. Um, and yeah, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. Um, and yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Namaste.